Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be doing my makeup and also answering some questions because I'm doing the makeup and books tag. I've been meaning to do this video for a couple of months, but I put it off because I was so intimidated to do my makeup in front of the camera, but it didn't work out too bad. But I was tagged to this video from Chloe from Books with Chloe, so thank you for the tag, Chloe. And I'm also answering all the questions that she did, and her video will of course be linked in the description box. I believe that the original creator of this tag, the video is not up, so I'm just going to be going off what Chloe did. So let's get into this. I've never filmed myself doing my makeup in front of the camera, so if I step up, we're just going to roll with it. We're just going to pretend nothing happens and we're just going to go with it. So the first prompt for this tag is primer, and for primer the question is pick a book that had a lasting impression on you. And the primer I use is the Fenty Beauty Pro Filt'r primer. So I feel like there's two ways you can do this. Books can have a negative lasting impression, but they can also have a great lasting impression. The one I ended up selecting was City of Bones. It is by no means the greatest book I have ever read. However, it is the book that I credit for turning me into a reader. For me, City of Bones is my Twilight. I first read it when I was like 13 or 14. My librarian at school recommended it to me because we had like these compulsory reading time sessions in our classes and you have to read a book from the library. And so I read City of Bones, was not thinking anything of it, and absolutely fell in love. It kept me up under the covers at night on school nights until I finished it. I was obsessed. Definitely like had such a lasting impression on me because as soon as I finished that book, I wanted to read every single other book that was out there that I could possibly get my hands on. I feel like I don't really need to go too much into it because it is so popular, and it's actually how I found BookTube in the first place. Like, see, lasting effects of City of Bones. I will say I have read it in recent years, and it's definitely not something that would have a lasting impression on me if I read it for the first time now, but I have such a huge appreciation for that book that it will always mean something to me. Next up is foundation, and I've recently been using my Clinique Beyond Perfecting. The question for foundation is to choose your favorite first book in a series. I went with Graceling. It is the first book in a companion trilogy, which is actually now being continued on. There's going to be a fourth book coming out next year, which I am so excited about. It's been a very long time since I've read this series, but it was my absolute favorite at like 16 years old. So we follow a girl called Katsa, who is the niece to the king, and she is graced. In this world, those who are graced are those who have magical abilities, but everyone has like a unique set of magical abilities to them. Katsa's ability is that she has the grace of killing. So the king, her uncle, uses her as an assassin, and what I loved about this book is how the magic and the graces in this world was used to explore the character and character development. Like, Katsa is someone who she's really alone. She's feared a lot. People know what she is used for and what she can do, and so she doesn't have a lot of people that she's close to in her life. And then of course she's also being used by her uncle the king to do his bidding. It was such an interesting look at Katsa's character and how she viewed herself, and you can tell that she never really liked her grace or wanted it. And that also goes for the side characters. There's quite a few significant side characters that also have graced abilities, and the author uses that to also explore their personalities. And what I loved about it was the next two books are actually companion books, so there's not a direct sequel, but you definitely do see the same characters later on, but you just always follow new main characters. And I just loved how the world expanded, and I just think the first book was so good. Next up for concealer, and for concealer I use the IT Cosmetics Bye Bye Under Eye, and the question for concealer is what is a character you wish did not exist? This was such an easy question to answer because oh boy, has Barrow from the Greenbone saga been driving me up the wall. Barrow is in Fonda Lee's Jade City and Jade War books. Like, he is a villain, but he's like the most pathetic villain that I just don't know how he achieves anything. At the beginning of the series, he starts off and he's really like young. I want to say he's in his teens. He's not smart. He has no skill whatsoever, and he somehow manages to possess power and also just worm his way out of tricky situations and survive death. Like, oh my god, he is just so annoying. Oh, My friend Tammy from Tammy Tries to Read did this thread on Twitter of a casting list of ideal actors and actresses that she would like to see play the characters in the TV show, movie. I can't remember what it's being turned into. And for Barrow, she posted a picture of a cockroach. It was hilarious. That is like literally what Barrow is. He's a cockroach. Like, there is no other way to describe him. I honestly am just baffled at how stupid this character is, and he still manages to worm his way out of all the tricky situations. Like, I'm waiting for karma to come get him. Next up is powder, and for powder I use the Innisfree No Serum Mineral Powder. And the question for powder is to choose your favorite last book in a series. This was really tricky because I feel like all my favorite last book in series now have sequels because every author seems to be continuing on their series. Doesn't help me with my, finishing series. I decided to go with Morningstar by Pierce Brown. I selected this because this had so many things that I like to see in a last book in a series. Like, I expect the stakes to be so high, and that was the case in this book. Red Rising is this sci-fi dystopian book, and at the beginning of the series we are following this young boy called Darrow, who is a red, and reds in this society are the lowest class, and the red class live under Mars and they are drilling under the planet, and the reds believe that they're tasked with being on Mars and doing the drilling and the digging into the ground. In order for civilization to move from Earth onto Mars, it's extremely dangerous, their life, and a lot of them die very young. What ends up happening is he finds out that civilization already moved to Mars and the planets years ago, and his people are just in slavery. Darrow then disguises himself as a gold, and golds are the highest class in this society. As his quest and his revolution is just so epic. Even though now Pierce Brown has continued on and there's going to be another 3 books after this book, there's currently only 2. This definitely still feels like a conclusion in so many ways. So next up is bronzer, and for bronzer I use Too Faced bronzer in medium, and the question for bronzer is to pick your favorite summer read. When I think of summer, I definitely think of Sophie Kinsella. Can you hear the kookaburras? They do this every time I sit down to film. Like, years ago, I went on this like huge Sophie Kinsella binge, and it was during summertime, so I spent like so much time beside the beach just reading Sophie Kinsella. She is the author of the Shopaholic series, which is, I feel like, is her most well-known series, since that series was turned into a TV show. No, it wasn't. It was turned into a movie. I loved a lot of her standalones. They're all kind of the same. Like, you kind of have a quirky heroine, and then she has an awkward encounter with a guy who ends up being her love interest. They were just a lot of fun. Nothing to take seriously. Next up is contour, and I do use my bronzer for contour. I also use this palette, this Pony Effect palette. I do use that, and I'm just going to use this for my nose. The question for contour is, what is a book that surprised you? And for this, I have to answer Monday's Not Coming. I read this back in June or July this year, and I went into it really not expecting much of anything. All I knew was that it was a YA contemporary mystery, and I have to be honest, I have a negative bias towards those genres because none of the books until this one have really impressed me. I mean, Sadie did, but typically when it comes to this genre, I'm not super impressed by the books I read. So I thought this might be fun, but wow, this book just packed such a punch. The main character in this is Claudia, and her best friend is called Monday. As the title indicates, Monday's gone missing, and you don't know what's happened to her. Part of the story is in the past, and we get to see Monday and Claudia's relationship and what they mean to one another. The amount of relationship depth that these two characters had and their dynamic was so powerful. I just felt so much for Claudia because we really came to understand how much Monday means to her. Oh my god. It was just such a well-written friendship. Next up is blush, and for blush I use Tarte Seduce, and I also use this Pony Effects palette again, and I do use that as well. And this palette is called Fabulous. The question for blush is to choose a cringe-worthy romance. This is so easy because I've been reading the Stormlight Archive books at the moment, and there is a romance between Delana and Navani that it's bad. I just wish it wasn't there. Every time they pop up in a scene and it's a romantic scene between them, Brandon Sanderson, I love what he does with a lot of his books, but he cannot write romance. He just shouldn't try because he cannot do it. And these two are like an example of how bad he can be at writing romance. I will say, do like the romance that's in Warbreaker, but this one in particular, the vomit emoji was invented because of him. Next up is highlighter, and for highlighter, I use Too Faced Blinded by Light. And the question for highlighter is to choose a book that brightens up your day. And the book that immediately came to mind for this question is The Girl Who Drank the Moon. I read this back in April and it is one of my favorite books of the year. I love that book to bits. It is basically a Studio Ghibli movie in a book. That's all you need to know. We follow a witch who takes in this baby girl and accidentally gives her moonlight, and then we follow that little girl as she grows up. It's so magical, so beautifully written. It's a Studio Ghibli movie in a book. That's all you need to know. Next up is brows. I have been using recently the Benefit Precisely My Brow Pencil, and the question for brows is, what book do you think everyone should read? And my answer to that is not really a book, an author, Khaled Hosseini. I think everyone should read his books. He is such an amazing storyteller, but he also tells such important stories. The 3 books of his that I've read, The Kite Runner, A Thousand Splendid Suns, and also And the Mountains Echo, are all about the Afghanistan war. He has these amazing relationships that are usually sibling relationships. Sometimes there's not actually siblings, but it might be 2 friends who grew up like siblings, and he just does it in such an amazing way. I just think everyone should read his books. I feel like they're really popular off BookTube. I always see them in like sellers at like airports or like bookstores and stuff, but I don't really hear many people on BookTube talk about him, and I think they should. My favorite book of his is And the Mountains Echo. And the Mountain Echoes follows 2 siblings. We have an older brother and a younger sister, and the younger sister is given away at the beginning of the book to this family who's moving to America because they come from a very poor family, and she's going to have a better life and more opportunities if she is given to this other family. Every like part of the story is told from different people who somehow end up interacting with these siblings. It's one of those stories where it's all these different puzzle pieces that eventually come together. Next up is brows, and the question for brows is to choose a book with your favorite colors. So my favorite colors is blue and red, and I decided for this to choose Looking for Ella Brandy by Melina Bichetta. Okay, I think I'm gonna use this palette by Huda Beauty. This is my favorite palette. It's called Desert Dust. Going in and using this Turkish Delight color. So I also chose Looking for Ella Brandy because the special like Penguins Classic Edition I have is one of my favorite copies of books that I own. This is one of my all-time favorite books. It is definitely the book that I have connected to more than any other book out there. I first read it when I was like 14, and I've reread it like every year pretty much since. It's by an Australian author who is also Italian-Australian. I see so much of myself in the main character. In a lot of ways, this book is just like a lot of other contemporary books. Family is a huge part of the story. Josie, the main character, was raised by a single mother. Her mother had her at a very young age. Josie is 17 and has never met her dad, and for the first time in her life at the beginning of this book, her dad comes back to Sydney where she's living, and in this she meets her dad. I'm gonna go in with this color Eden. I adore the family relationships, and in particular there's a real focus on female relationships because Josie has a really close relationship with her mother, but then she also has this really complicated relationship with her nonna. That's the book. Like, there is a romance, like Josie does have a romance for the first time in her life with a boy, but that is such a minor part of the story. One of my favorite things about the romance in it though is there's this discussion on consent, and there's actually this scene in the book. This is mild spoilers. I'll put a timestamp if you don't want to hear this bit, but there is a scene where Josie and him start getting really intimate to the point where they're about to have sex, and Josie's like, no, I don't want to do it. And I really love that because I can remember when I was younger, a lot of the YA books that I read, they were all about having the first time and falling in love and, yeah, you know, having sex with your true love for the first time. And this one was the only one that did not do that, and that said that it's okay to say no. Like, you don't have to if you're not ready. And I think that is so important, and I wish more, well, I don't know if more YA books do it these days because I don't read a whole lot of YA contemporaries, but I think it's such an important message. Okay, and I'm gonna go in with this amber color and just put that here. For my inner corners, I'm gonna use this angelic. I think I might just get this color that I put on my lid, Turkish Delight, and just put it in the outer corner. I'm just going to use a little bit of this dark color, like just a dab just to add that extra dimension. Next up is eyeliner, and for eyeliner I use Colourpop Cream Gel Line in Mr. Bing. And the question for eyeliner is to choose a dark and mysterious book. So for this I chose The Bone Witch. The Bone Witch is so dark and mysterious. The reason I find The Bone Witch really dark is we follow a necromancer. So at the start we're introduced to this young girl in this small village. She doesn't think she has any magical abilities, and then she finds out that she does because she accidentally brings her brother back from the dead. She is then whisked away to the city to train and grow and all that. But we also get a second timeline where we see her in the future where she's older and she's been exiled. You know that she's done something to have made her go into exile, and it's something bad, and she's a villain, question mark. So I love how we have this really dark tone of a story. There's also this mysterious element as you get hints of the future and you don't know what's to come. So I think it's just the ideal book for this question. Okay, next up is mascara, and I use NYX mascara Worth the Hype. The question for this is to choose a long book. I decided to choose The Bone Clocks by David Mitchell. I chose this because not only is it long, but it's also literary fiction, so it feels extra long. The Bone Clocks is a story that follows this girl called Holly Sykes. We meet her at around 15, 16, and we follow her entire life, but we only get her perspective from the first chapter, and then every other chapter in the book is other people that she eventually encounters in her life. So there's like boyfriends, mentors, work colleagues, and it was just such an interesting story because you're introduced to Holly and you see her how she sees herself, and then you see her through the eyes of all these other people that she encounters and how she really is, but then you also see her grow up and how she changes, and it's just so interesting. There's also this other element with these other people trying to achieve immortal life. There's like the sideline because there is like a fantastical element to the story. Such a cool book. I need to reread it. It's one of my favorites. So well written, so poetic. We're down to the last step, and that is lipstick. So I'm going to be using Kylie Candy K lip liner. This isn't the actual Kylie Candy K lip liner. It's a dupe. I bought it when I was in Thailand. So, and I'm also using Pat McGrath's lip gloss Dare to Bear. And the question for lipstick is, what is your favorite book kiss? And for this I have to say the kiss from The Girl on Fire and Thorns, just because these characters had so much angst and tension, and then when it finally happened, it was so good. The Girl of Fire and Thorns is a series where we follow this young princess who was born with this godstone in her belly button, which basically means she's destined to become this great savior. In the first book, she is married off after having an arranged marriage with someone older and a king from a neighboring kingdom. But it's not really about that. Like, it's so adventurous, this book, and you get to see like different parts of the world. That was my favorite thing about it. You know, you get to see the jungle climates and then like the snow area, and it's just so cool, and I love all the relationships and the journey. We're all done. That wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. It was a little bit awkward trying to figure out like where to look at the camera or in the mirror. But other than that, it wasn't too chaotic. So that is the end of this video. Thank you to Chloe for tagging me, and also I want to tag some people to do this. I'm going to tag Meg from Meg with Books. I want to also tag Ishi from Ishi Time. I'm also going to tag Leora from Books with Leo and Tammy from Tammy Tries to Read. I would love to see you guys do this and hear your answers to these questions. So that's it from me. Thank you so much for watching, and I really hope that you're enjoying whatever you're currently reading, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!